know if it's the time to be lobbying for lower sentences, but here I am, It may not be, there's so much going on right now politically and all of this that it's like, well, let's do what I can do, because people should know about it. We're America. We're the land of the free. And we have a Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights says no cruel punishment. It's prohibited. And there's a reason they put that in there. Because, it's easy for a government to get out of control and become very cruel.
Welcome to another episode of Voices of Liberty, powered by Young Americans for Liberty. I'm your host, Sean Themea, and today we're here to talk to someone whose worldview was shaped by real experience for her and her family. Most of us, for politics, it's shaped by theory or shaped by possibility, but for her, this was shaped by reality. And it's a story of hope. It's a story of someone who took on the federal prison system where her son was undergoing a double life sentence with no possibility of parole, and she won the fight to get him free. This is an incredible guest. It's an incredible story, and we're excited to have her on the program today. Please welcome to Voices of Liberty, Lyn Ulbricht. Lyn, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm very happy to be talking to you. And as I was saying before the show, Yal has been so supportive of us, and you have, and I'm really happy to be here talking to you.
So for those who may not be familiar with your story or your son Ross, can you tell us what happened to you and your family?
Yeah, I remember it very vividly. Well, just as background, Ross is a very idealistic libertarian who was concerned about privacy and freedom. And he had an idea, and it was to create an online marketplace that was based on the non-aggression principle, that you don't hurt other people, that what you do between you and someone else, as long as you're not hurting anybody else or defrauding them, was your business. And it mushroomed into a huge website called Silk Road. And he was eventually arrested for that because there were a lot of drugs bought and sold there, and ended up in a trial, a horrible trial, frankly, and then sentenced to double life plus 40 years. In case he outlived that double life, give him 40 years more, and a lifetime of supervised release if he ever got out, which is almost like walking prison. And our whole world was just shattered, and of course Ross's. And so I decided, I had a lot of trust in I had a lot of trust in the system. Not the whole system, but the justice system. I really felt like we had fair trials, and thought every day I would walk into that courthouse past this giant statue, beautiful statue of justice with the scales, and it's very dramatic. And I'd be like, he's going to have justice. This is going to be fair. And frankly, in my opinion, it was not a fair trial, starting with the fact that the judge would not allow the jury to note his libertarian beliefs. That was struck from the case, from the trial. And they also weren't allowed to hear about corrupt agents who were eventually ended up in prison for being on the site and manipulating it and other things. It was shocking to me. And that's when I thought, wow, the justice system is not what I thought it was. And once my son, it was his first time offense, he was 26 years old. I knew him very well. He's not, of course, a violent person or a dangerous person. And for him to get that kind of sentence, basically death in prison sentence, it was devastating and so shocking that this would happen in our country. And since then, fighting for him for almost 12 years until, thank God, President Trump kept his word and pardoned Ross, which was an incredible miracle. I learned, I talked to so many people, both in and out of the prison, like people who would reach out to me and say, oh, my son did a minor drug crime and now he's in prison for, almost 20 years. And this kind of thing just devastated parents and families. And I thought, these are the kind of sentences that I grew up with. Something's wrong. And all you have to do is read the Bill of Rights and the Eighth Amendment. And Thomas Massey pointed this out to me, and it's so true. It prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And the punishments that people are getting now, life sentences, are not all that rare for nonviolent crimes, mostly drug crimes, and life, spending the rest of your life in a cage. And that didn't happen when I was growing up. I was like, what is going on? I had no idea, really. And I realized a lot of people don't. And so I had the thought, someone's got to do something about this. Someone has to say something about this. But I was still in the thick of trying to save my own son. But once he was free, I brought back that idea, because it was really quite heartbreaking to walk out of the prison with him. Well, we didn't walk with him. From a visit with him, we all left. And the people in the prison who we gotten to know were like, bye, good luck. We're so happy for you. And it was just, and we left them there, they have all those years to face. And it was just, none of them, from what I could tell and from what I'd learned, were violent. And I don't think they would have been allowed in the visiting room. So I just kept feeling like, well, I have been given this notoriety of sorts, with some people, and connections and insights. And the right thing to do is to speak about it. So that's what I'm doing. People just need to understand that these sentences, I'm not saying people don't make mistakes. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. And I'm also not saying that we shouldn't have any prisons, because as Ross has said, and another person who got double life, Leonard Picard, who now is out, thankfully, as well, I'm working on research at Harvard. And he said, there's very dangerous people in there that really must be protected from. But most of them, a lot of them, you wouldn't be scared to walk down a dark alley and see them. They're not dangerous. They're not going to hurt you physically. They're not a threat to your life. And it seems like we should have other ways to, in the 21st century, to come up with ways to have them pay back, make restitution, and be, there's technology that they can wear an ankle bracelet. They can have computers and cameras right on their laptops to see what they're doing. All of that, they can be confined at their homes. And I'm talking about nonviolent people, often with children, and whose children are being hurt. So anyway, I feel like we're really behind in how we deal with prisons and the incarcerated. And yeah, I've met the actual people. So it's sometimes I just kind of like, I need to rest, But then I think about them and I think, well, I need to do something. So that's why I'm talking to you.
Yes, so much to unpack there, and so glad to know that he's free. And obviously, I know he's free because I saw him speak at Freedom Fest last year in Palm Springs.
And that was the best. I love that speech because he talks about the prison. Yeah.
Yes, and to echo what you said just now earlier, I remember he had framed it as the only purpose of a prison, is to keep those who are a true violent danger to others, away from committing that danger. It's not for vengeance. It's not for torture. It's not for punishing disobedience. But as he said he saw in the system, those are often the things that happen in the prison system is, vengeance, torture, a sense of obscene power, being held over others. And, you mentioned the work you're doing now, which I'm excited to talk about, but I want to hear more about what you did to advocate for Ross's freedom. I mean, this is a sentence that seems insurmountable at the time. Double life sentence, no possibility of parole, federal sentence, right? So all of these, seemingly no light at the end of the tunnel, but you never gave up. And could you share with us what that was like, what you did for advocacy and how ultimately it led to his freedom?
Absolutely. I knew I wasn't going to give up even if I had to die trying. I wasn't going to give up ever. But I'm getting older. I was hoping I wouldn't have to do it till the end of my days. But I couldn't rest with him rotting in there and dying in there. I just couldn't. And so, of course, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about the dark web, crypto, the justice system, law, any of that stuff. I really had no connections, except Ross was high profile. And so there were a lot of people who were sympathetic. But there was also, a lot of, it wasn't just an automatic, but I thought, well, I'm just going to do the next thing I do. Now, I prayed a lot. I really believe this was divinely led. I really do. And throughout, for whatever reason, the God has, it's meant to be that he's free. And I'm very grateful. Even now, I think, God, I can't believe it. I can't believe he's out of prison. It was just so amazing. But at the time, some of his friends from high school who knew him in college stepped up. And one of them, I remember getting the call from a newspaper reporter who at Reuters. And what happened was I came in to talk to my husband at the time, and he had his head in his hands like something had happened. And I said, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And he said, "I just got a call from Reuters and Ross is in prison." And I'm like, "What? Are you kidding?" Came totally out of the blue. And then she called later, very nice, and said, "Yeah." And she kind of told me the basics. And I was like, this is crazy. This is impossible. And she told me about the murder for hire allegations, which later were discounted, certainly by the court, never charged in New York, and then later dropped by Maryland. But in any case, I was just, no way. There's no way he did that. And anyway, then I turned on the TV, and there's George Stephanopoulos going, "Congratulations, Chuck Schumer," or no, Eric Holder, I think, or somebody. He was saying, oh no, that was Schumer who congratulated Holder. I'm getting a little confused. But he was like, "Yeah, this guy did this." And I thought, well, wait a minute, how do you know he did it? Don't we have trials? Don't we have innocent until proven guilty? What's the deal? Then the phone started ringing off the hook, and the news people came by, and they were banging on our doors. And I'm like, what is going on? And my emails are pouring in. Total shock. And I just remember waking up the next morning and just, did this happen? And I thought, they're saying all these things about Ross, and I know they're not true. I've got to do something, right? And so this friend from high school said, well, I went to him, and I said, I got to put up something on the web. I don't know how, though. And he helped me put up a one-pager about who Ross is and who Ross is not. And that was the first public thing. And then a few people stepped up to help. And then a few months later, Pork Fest. At first, they were like, well, a friend said, I'm going up to New Hampshire this festival, and I'm going to bring T-shirts to sell for Ross. And I'm like, well, I'll go with you. I'll hand out flyers or something. He goes, no, you should speak. And I'm like, me speak? No. And so then I thought, well, I'm supposed to go speak, I guess, because they first said, sorry, we don't have space for you. we're already booked. And I'm like, oh, okay, phew, I don't have to do it. And then the next day they said, no, we do. We have space. We're going to put you in the main pavilion. We want you to speak. And that was my first public speech, which I worked very hard on. And that sort of started things going. Nick Gillespie from Reason was in the audience, and he had me on his thing. Alex Winter heard about it, and he made Deep Web, and it started to build. And so really what I think happened was that a movement. We started a movement. And little old me, who didn't really know, really, encryption, all this, I'm still not great about it. Didn't know much, but you just talk to people, and it's amazing the power that people can have and the connections. And but it took a long time. It took over 11 years. So perseverance, just keep going. I kept going, keep your eye on the prize, keep your eye on the prize, and, one day at a time. And that's really how it happened, very grassroots, although we were able to connect with people who had more influence over time. Big help from, of course, the libertarian community and the Bitcoin community and crypto, the same, cryptocurrency communities. And they all rallied over time around Ross.
Yeah. Was there ever a moment in this, fight to free Ross that almost broke you, where you felt like there was no hope? Did you maintain hope the whole time? Tell us about, the toughest times of, between the arrest and the freedom.
Well, the sentence was rough. That was a rough sentence. And we were devastated. It was like, oh my God, I can't, what do I do? This sentence, double life plus 40 years. It's a walking death sentence. And that was extremely hard. And then losing the Supreme Court, we got up to the Supreme Court and being denied that, and just different losses. But the sentence was, I'd say, emotionally most devastating. But I ended up having a heart thing. I almost died from my heart going, they called it broken heart syndrome. It's an attack on your left ventricle. It's the stress of it. And so that was pretty hard, although I I was kind of out of it for a lot of it. I almost left the whole thing physically. But, and there were times, it was just like different, like when President Trump didn't pardon him or, commute him at all the first time. I was really hoping for that. And a lot of people were talking to him. And he told Charlie Kirk, he said, I've never had so many people advocate for someone, but I've never had the DOJ push back against someone so hard. It was a battle. And it didn't happen that time. And I just remember when we had really, really hoped for that, obviously. And when that didn't happen, I remember just lying on my bed going, what do I do? What do I do now? But you just keep going. I prayed about it. I had a lot of encouragement. I just, you get setbacks, absolutely have setbacks. And I had the sentencing and then that, and thinking, there's a lot of setbacks. But you just, one step at a time, one day at a time is how I did it.
When President Trump did pardon him, I heard nothing but cheers and a sigh of relief from many people across the country. Why do you think the DOJ was pushing so hard to prevent that from happening?
I know they did that with Alice Johnson too, who had been pardoned by President Trump. Ross was a trophy. That's how I see it. Ross was a trophy. And they weren't happy about having him out. as far as I can tell, a lot of them don't want anybody out. I don't know. It's, but yeah, I think maybe it makes them look, in their minds, makes them look bad that they were wrong somehow. I don't know. It's hard for me to get inside the mind of a prosecutor or someone in that, mindset.
Yeah. And really to look at the sentence he was given, right? Again, he started a website for free exchange. Any claims of, violence or, like you said, like the allegations of violence, they were dropped. They were never charged. And yet they sentenced him to a double life sentence plus 40 years, no possibility of parole. That is much harsher than a sentence that the average rapist or murderer or child abuser would get, right? So gross miscarriage of justice. And yet the tough on crime narrative, right, plays well in political campaigns. It seems to do well with the public. I think it taps into this primal sense of swift justice and fairness. And as a whole, I think generally speaking, the average person would say, hey, I don't see a problem with law and order. And in fact, maybe we need more people in jail. It seems to be the narrative these days. If you keep an eye on the ground, keep an eye on the grassroots, what would you say to those people from what you've learned about the criminal justice system?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a good timing wise for me to be talking about these exorbitant sentences politically. I think maybe people are like, well, yeah, do the crime, do the time, or whatever. The thing is, it all gets conflated, and these are individuals, and each case is an individual case. But I understand, especially with violent criminals, but I don't see that it's worth the cost to our budget, which is the Bureau of Prisons is the highest, most expensive item in the DOJ's budget. It's very expensive to do this. But I also don't see, I think there's a place for mercy and a place for rehabilitation, even in the law. And so I understand that reaction, but I think it's short-sighted. I don't think it's constructive. There's a lot of people who, well, Ross will say, and so are other prisoners I've talked to, former prisoners I've talked to. There's so many people in there, and he says over half easily, who don't deserve it. They've paid their time, and they these giant sentences. I don't think most people understand what it is. When you brought up torture, an interesting test that Ross did while I was in prison was he wrote about this, where he went around and talked to the different prisoners, and he said, so if you could be tortured, like actual physical torture, like flogging or have your fingernails pulled out or have, just whatever you can think of, or live out your sentence, be here and not suffer physically like that, which would you pick? And they said, bring on the torture, bring on the whatever it is. I don't care how much pain it is at the time if it's finite. And it kind of shows that it's so bad. I don't think people understand how cruel it really is. I'm not saying no one should ever go to prison. I'm not saying, but in Ross's case, double life plus 40 years. He was young. He was a first-time offender. He was no record of violence at all. It's kind of like, isn't that kind of overkill? So I think there are better ways to do this, and more constructive ways. So,
yeah.
and less expensive ways. So
tell us about what that looks like. If you could cast a vision for a better way to reshape our incarceration system, our criminal justice system, what would that look like?
Well, I can just talk about sentencing. The whole criminal justice system, well, maybe it would reflect on that. We are the biggest incarcerator on the planet, certainly of developed countries. And that's, there's one of the few who give these incredible sentences. Like life without parole apparently is up 800%. And since 23, up 68%. It's just too much. And so many people in there, it's drug offenses. I've had a hard time pinning down the exact number, but there's at least 100 people serving life for marijuana. Their whole life for marijuana. Times change and that sentence doesn't change. They're not dangerous. They're not violent. People make mistakes. So it seems to me that going on the point that prisons are made to protect us, we out here, that people who aren't violent can have some retribution, but also that they can, it's punishment. Also, I suppose it would be punishment, but home confinement, for example, doing community service, paying back, having, it's like, and then that would not be the children and the families suffering as well. So I'd like to see more of that and less keeping them in cages in these prisons, which are, it's really hard to be there. And really, there's prisons around the world that are way worse than here, but they're bad prisons here. They're all bad. I mean, it's your freedom, So there's something called there was something that was passed called the Sentencing Reform Act, and the whole point of it is sentences should be as long as necessary to achieve rehabilitation, maybe some retribution in there, whatever, but use the parsimony clause, which is basically as short as possible to achieve the goal. A lot of people, after 5 years in prison, would be like, I ain't not going back there. I mean, right now, there's several guys who are in there for cryptocurrency. That I know them. I know them personally. They're not dangerous. Why are they in a prison? It's, how is that not just about punishment? And so it'd be nice to have some more options to achieve the same goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some things that Ross had shared on this subject at his Freedom Fest speech, really, really stuck with me. And, I never kind of thought of it in these terms, but, no particular order. He said that, the people that our government puts in cages are, definitionally the least among us, and how we treat them speaks to who we are as a people, as a nation, or it should. And some of the stuff he saw, right, these beds they'd strap people to, leave them there, be in their filth for several days. He knew people who lost certain function in their hands, permanent limps, because of these torture beds. And these are folks who, he had assessed, pose no danger to society should they have been released. And yet here they are in this cage, strapped to this torture bed. To what end are we doing this, right? And, another point he brought up really stuck with me was the notion of federal sentencing, right, for crimes like this or situations like this, comes without parole and without conjugal visits.
That's right.
Right? So the government is not just controlling how long you're in this cage, but it's controlling the fact that you cannot procreate, right? Mm-hmm. And he called that for what he saw it to be, which is a silent eugenics program that the federal prison system is pushing and facilitating. And, I think if people were to reconsider how they see prison in practice, and not just what it might be in theory, then, we'd see a lot of different policy and a lot of different opinions. But people need to wake up and start to face some of these horrible facts, and not just what, in theory, sentencing is, in theory, what prison is, which is maybe a lot more comforting. I know for me, it's easy to, speak for myself in the past, say, oh yeah, I know that's, people go there and that's the way it should be. And we just can't accept that a priori when we start to realize what's happening in there. And so, I'm grateful that Ross had the strength to share, that experience with us in Palm Springs. And you can find that on YouTube, but we'll put it in the comments of this video. Tell us about the work you're doing now with Mothers Against Cruel Sentencing.
Well, I really, I was trying to figure out what can I do. And I finally came to the conclusion that what I can do is talk about it and talk to people behind the scenes and try to make things happen. And that's what I'm doing, just to call attention to it. I've had some personal stuff go on and some health stuff go on that slowed me down on this. But that's what I've decided to focus on. I think the most influence I can have on this is just make it, people see it. It's not, I never thought about people in the prison before Ross was arrested. I really didn't. They're kind of shut away. You don't think about them. And of course now I do, and it's not popular because it's like, there's so many people suffering in the world, and who cares about these guys? They messed up. We don't need to, or they're bad or they're whatever. But they are human beings, and they are some very good human beings, and they shouldn't be in there. And like I said, there are some that should and need to be, and maybe someday they won't have to be. But some are dangerous people, and probably more than either you or I would ever know about, but know how dangerous. I mean, Ross and his other friends are like, yeah, you don't even want to hear about what they've done, kind of thing. Yes, we need that. We need that protection. But, I agree with you. And I'm so glad you were so moved by that talk, because that was, of all his talks he did, was the one I thought was the most moving, I don't know. I didn't know a lot of that. And he said, well, I just didn't want to tell you, So it was, I was shocked. Yeah. I was shocked.
Yeah.
So,
and these are the stories that never get told, again, because these people are put away for life. So how are they going to tell anybody? And, Ross was able to. Yeah.
Now that he's out. Yeah. Yeah. So I like I said, I don't know if it's the time to be lobbying for lower sentences, but here I am, It may not be. There's so much going on right now politically and all of this that it's like, well, let's do what I can do, because people should know about it. We're America. We're the land of the free. And we have a Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights says no cruel punishment. It's prohibited. And there's a reason they put that in there. Because, it's easy for a government to get out of control and become very cruel. And it starts there, And, yeah. So I think that's important to keep an eye on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, you said something very important there, which, not being sure if it's, quote unquote, the right time for a certain policy. And I think that anything that's truly transformative, right, where you're reducing the size and scope of government, where you're taking power away from the hands of the powerful, there's really never a good time for that, because there will always be these great forces coming up against you. The political climate almost will never shift in the favor of radical change. But again, there was never really a very slim chance that Ross would ever get out, and that never stopped you from your advocacy, and that never stopped other people from joining. And so, it sounds like, if the work that a liberty advocate is doing, if they feel like, hey, this might not be the right time, it probably means that cause is worth pushing, right? My 2 cents. But tell us more about some of the other opportunities that you see in the liberty movement right now, whether that's related to criminal justice and sentencing or not, that you think there should be more attention on.
Well, free speech, our speech, that's the one that worries me the most, because if we lose that, we don't have anything to, that's to me, the most important of it all is free speech. That's at the foundation of all of it. And, I think there is a very strong, movement with that, but I don't know. I just, that to me is most important. Being able to speak freely about whatever you want.
Right. Because, without that right enshrined and protected, we really can't do anything, right? Yeah. We can't, the next thing you know, we won't be able to think freely if we can't speak freely, and God forbid
exactly.
that. For the person listening, thinking, I'm just an ordinary person. I want to help make big change happen, but I don't know how to get started. I don't know where to get started. Whether that's related to sentencing or any change they want to see in the world for liberty. What would you say to them? How would you recommend they take that first step?
Well, that describes how I was exactly. So, one step at a time, one day at a time, but is a lot of networking. There's a lot of networking involved, and behind the scenes networking as well as speaking out. Yeah, it's amazing what one person can do, and get more people involved and get more people seeing how you're seeing it. Yeah, I think that's how it happened for me. It was just meeting people and pressing through. Sometimes it's kind of intimidating I'm going to go up to this congressman. I'm going to talk to him, and then it's like, oh, I don't, it's intimidating to try to fight for things. But then I'd go, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for Ross, and it worked out most of the time. And, it's just be brave. It's difficult. It's difficult, but it's worth it. And, it's surprising too, how, you go, wow, they're receptive. They're listening. Things happen that I was shocked. Like when RFK, for example, at the Bitcoin conference, actually said he was going to consider Ross's clemency. I was like, oh my God, he said that, And then Vivek Ramaswamy, he did too. He came out, and it was just, all those little things, they're not little, they're huge, things that built on it. And then, of course, President Trump. That was like, that was amazing. And so grateful for that. And so, it's the thing is, I kept saying to myself, as far as clemency, it's just people and paperwork. It's just somebody signing a piece of paper. That's all it is. It's not like you have to look at that mountain over there. I'm going to move that mountain. It's a piece of paper and a pen. So, it's you got to put it in perspective. It's you do what you can. That's how I see it. And believe, like I say, I felt like it was divinely led. I really do. It gave me courage too. But yeah, I think the fight is worthwhile. The fight for freedom is very worthwhile. And yeah,
absolutely
just keep going.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. actually, I want to say a little more about the families that are affected by this, because it's very easy. That guy did that, throw him away for, 30 years. 30 years is a lot, big sentence. 10 years is a big sentence. There are children involved here often, small children who are, very hurt by this. And I saw this in the prisons. I just remember this one little boy who, Ross at the time was at MCC, which is the prison where El Chapo was and where Jeffrey Epstein was, and different high-profile people and others. They're awaiting trial or awaiting, various things. And we went up in an elevator. We'd all go up in an elevator to the visiting room. And this little boy, he was probably 6, had an I Love My Daddy t-shirt. And he was just so excited to see his dad. And he crawled in his lap and he was just hugging him and wouldn't let go and the whole time. And then when he was torn away, he was a very different child going down the same elevator. He was devastated. He was crying and he was sobbing. And you could tell he was wounded. He was harmed. And it's like, this is so hard on families. It's so hard on children. And one mom who I got to know a bit, she was raising a couple of kids in a rough part of New York. And she was just, God, until this happened, my kids, they were getting straight A's. They were doing really well. She was a very hardworking, good mom. And she said, now they're going wild ever since he's been in prison. I'm not saying it was his, he shouldn't have gone to prison. He shouldn't have done what got him in prison. I get that. People make mistakes. But the people, I feel like people don't realize the harm it does to families. And these kids, I just remember them so clearly, and it's going to affect the rest of their lives. And often they end up in prison themselves. So that's, also something that really has stuck with me. The damage, you don't realize how much, it's not just the offender who's done this, or suffers from this, which it is, but it's their families and the whole community sometimes. And that's why I say, if they're nonviolent, if they're not going to hurt anybody, and that's not their charge. And if they are violent, maybe that's now, and maybe that's not forever, but for now, if not, anyway. So a lot of young people, by the way, just quickly, under 18 or 8, that age, by the time they're 30 or even, they're different. They've matured. A lot of the young ones get life sentences or huge sentences. It's just, and it's, how about let's look at it, how they're doing. And if they're a model prisoner, there's many model prisoners who have proven over years that they're rehabilitated.
What else, if anything, have we not touched on that you want to share?
Well, really, just to say such a huge amount of gratitude I have and that Ross has for the support from, Yale and the libertarians and freedom people. And that includes a lot of the crypto people. There's a huge overlap, of course. And we couldn't have done it without you guys. We couldn't have. I personally had so much support, and everywhere I went, to conferences or wherever, I was, just love bombed. It was like, I had so much, because then I'd go back to my little computer and I got to answer this but so it just enriched me and strengthened me to be able to go on. And, I was kind of thrown into an alien world of this, dark web and all of this and the whole thing. And it was just so meant everything to me to have my friends. I'm still friends with a lot of people, and still involved. And so I just want to say thank you. Just want to say thank you.
Of course, happy for us to play a small role, and it was a cause worth fighting for. I mean, we're not free unless we're all free, as Ross had said, and so his pardon and his freedom from prison meant a lot for a lot of people. Did I ask about like specific policy? Like if there was one policy that you think if a switch was flipped tomorrow, then that would be, transformative. Is that something we talked about? Does anything come to mind for that?
Well, I think that I think we could do without life without parole, except for the most egregious and extreme cases, and have it reviewed after 20 years, something like that. I feel like it's given way too casually, easily, commonly. There's too much. It's like, oh, life without parole, or else 30 years, 50 years, because besides life without parole, officially, it ends up being life because people die in prison. Maybe every sentence that's more than 50 years, which is a life sentence in a sense. Ross, if he had gotten 50 years, he would have been 80 when he got out, So I feel like, and the other thing is, why does the federal system not have parole? And the other thing, going back to children, the lack of conjugal rights in the federal system. Well, first of all, if I were trying to control 1,000 to 2,000 men in a prison, I probably wouldn't take away conjugal rights, okay? But also, it's not only the wife and husband, it's also the kids. It's a family thing. So they can see their father. It's usually the father, or their parent. And so I don't understand why they did that, and I would revert that.
Yeah, no, makes sense to me. And we're coming to the end of our time here, Lyn, but to go and revisit, the advice for people looking to take action. If there was one thing that people could do to take steps to learn more about our criminal justice and sentencing system, what direction would you point them in?
Well, there's a lot of information on statistics. There's a lot of statistics and things like that, and websites online. I'm not sure I can give you a good answer there. I'd say just start researching. It's lots of stuff on there. I don't know if there's really enough, especially looking at the angle of, there's different, the ACLU, the Sentencing Project, the Last Prisoner Project, different Can Do. I can name a bunch of them that are great, that show that have been fighting this fight a long time. And so that's what I would start with.
Well, thank you. Very helpful. Well, Lyn, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing how you and the movement fought to free Ross, and that you are continuing the work today, beyond your own family, but advocating for families of others and against cruel sentencing. I think it's essential to liberty, and appreciate your time and everything you're doing.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really great to talk to you.
You as well. Thanks for being with us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe to Voices of Liberty on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, or YouTube. And to learn more about how you can be a part of the movement advancing freedom in our lifetime, visit yaliberty.org. I'm Sean Themea, and thank you for listening to Voices of Liberty, where we keep the torch of liberty burning by telling the stories of those who carry it forward. See you next time.